Today I want to show you how Dr. Taylor Marshall and other people try to justify their disobedience to the Church. I am only using him as an example, since he is arguably the most well-known and has the biggest influence, but many others use the same argument, especially his supporters who learned this from him. This video will be divided into 4 important sections. Firstly, we will look at Dr. Taylor Marshall's position. Then I will directly engage his main argument, and in the third section, we will look at some of the implications of his argument, and then in the fourth and final section, I will discuss some further implications regarding some of his interpretations and accusations against the text of Vatican II itself. So without further ado, here is Dr. Taylor Marshall.
Paul VI said this at the closing of the Second Vatican Council, December 7, 1965. He says, quote, "The magisterium of the Church did not wish to pronounce itself under the form of extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements," end quote. That's a big deal. I'm going to put it on the screen. I want everybody to see this. The magisterium of the Church did not wish to pronounce itself under the form of extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements. In other words, it was not going to exercise extraordinary magisterium. People were perplexed by this. Wait, isn't that what ecumenical councils are supposed to do, Holy Father? So he clarified himself. And by the way, if you want these quotes, they're in my book, Infiltration, on page 143, both of them. I'm going to add it to this one here. So Paul VI then clarified a few months later, in January 1966. Let me see if I can make this better. Yeah, this is good here. In view of the pastoral nature of the council, it has avoided proclaiming in an extraordinary manner any dogma carrying the mark of infallibility. End quote. So here you have a pope, the one who saw the ending of Vatican II. He said the magisterium didn't want to pronounce under the form of extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements, and then said that it doesn't have any dogma carrying the mark of infallibility. So what does that mean for Vatican II? Vatican II is unique, my friends. Vatican II is a pastoral council. In fact, just this past week, Bishop Barron, he's been doubling down. All these bishops got the memo, by the way. Stitka, Tobin, Barron, hey, we got to double down on Vatican II. Vigano and others are starting to beat the drum. Let's all get out there and criminalize Vigano. And we got to talk about how awesome Vatican II and how good it's been for the church and how it's inspired faith and done all these great things. It's a pastoral council. And yet, the Pope who ended it in 65 and 66 said, hey, it's not under the extraordinary form, not under the form of extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements, and does not carry the mark of infallibility. So for people like myself, I think for Vigano, for Schneider, for many others, they say, okay, well, that means something's up for debate here in the Second Vatican Council. If there is a dialogue, if there is a debate, if it's not infallible, if it's not under the extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements of the Church, then we should be able to go through the documents and say, this is ambiguous, this is problematic, and can we say this is erroneous? Is this an error that is in the Church?
So he quotes Pope Paul VI, saying that the Council did not pronounce in an extraordinary manner any dogma that is infallible. Dr. Taylor Marshall then says that Vatican II is a pastoral council, which means that some things Vatican II said is up for debate. People like himself can question things, can identify what is wrong, and even heresy, if you recall my previous video. So firstly, is it true that Vatican II was merely a pastoral council? Read Vatican II and tell me with a straight face that Vatican II did not teach doctrine. I dare you. But don't take my word for it. Here is a list of multiple definitive teachings by Vatican II which you need to accept. And the sad irony is, the same Pope he quoted, saying that there is no new dogmatic pronouncements in order to justify himself to reject the teachings of Vatican II, literally told you that doctrine was taught authoritatively. The Council's task is to bring certain troublesome theological controversies to a close. Its task is to finally manifest to the faithful of the Catholic Church and to our brothers and sisters from separated communities what is the true concept of the orders of the sacred hierarchy, of which it was said, "The Holy Spirit has set up overseers to govern the Church of God, and indeed with a firm authority which may not be called into doubt." The same Pope told you that, despite the pastoral character of the Council, it still contains authoritative teachings on doctrine. The Council having a pastoral character refers to how the teachings are expressed and communicated. Teachings. It is still a teaching. Teachings are authoritative. The later Pope St. John Paul II, who was present at the Second Vatican Council, wrote the following when he was still a cardinal. It may be said that every council in a church's history has been a pastoral one, if only because the assembled bishops, under the Pope's guidance, are pastors of the Church. At the same time, every council is an act of the supreme magisterium of the Church. Magisterium signifies teaching based on authority, a teaching which is the mission of the apostles and their successors. It is part of their function and an essential task. This teaching is concerned essentially with the questions of faith and morals, what men and women should believe in and in what manner, and hence how they should live according to their faith. The doctrine of faith and morals is the content of the teaching of the pastors of the Church, so that on the one hand, doctrinal acts of the magisterium have a pastoral sense, while on the other, pastoral acts have a doctrinal significance, deeply rooted as they are in faith and morals. These pastoral acts contain the doctrine that the Church proclaims. They often make it clearer and more precise, striving incessantly to achieve the fullness of the divine truth. All this has been signally confirmed by Vatican II, which, while preserving its pastoral character and mindful of the purpose for which it was called, profoundly developed the doctrine of faith and thus provided a basis for its enrichment. Many ecumenical councils have a pastoral nature, but that does not mean that they didn't teach anything authoritatively and that you can just dismiss anything you want to. At the last public session of the council, Pope Paul VI said that one thing must be noted here, namely that the teaching authority of the Church, even though not wishing to issue extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements, has made thoroughly known its authoritative teaching on a number of questions, which today weigh upon man's conscience and activity, descending, so to speak, into a dialogue with him, but ever preserving its own authority and force. The Council contains authoritative teachings on doctrine. The Pope also said that, despite the Council not pronouncing in an extraordinary manner any dogma that is infallible, the Council still invested its teachings with the authority of the supreme ordinary magisterium, which ordinary magisterium is so obviously authentic that it must be accepted with docility and sincerity by all the faithful, according to the mind of the Council, as expressed in the nature and aims of the individual documents. The Council having a pastoral character does not mean that you can dismiss everything you don't like in order to justify your disobedience. You cannot dismiss the text of the Second Vatican Council as mere opinions. It is authoritative teachings by the magisterium. And as a side note, you still need to assent to church discipline, not only things that concern faith and morals. Yes, Pope Paul VI did say that there were not any extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements by the Church at the Council, but that does not mean that there were not any authoritative teachings concerning faith and morals. People who quote the Pope saying that there were not any extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements at the Council seems to be ignorant of all the quotations by the same Pope who said that the Council contained authoritative teachings. But even if you were ignorant of what the Pope said, anyone who knows the absolute basics of the magisterium would realize that them utilizing that quote does not prove their point. But for some reason, Dr. Taylor Marshall, having the responsibilities that go along with being a Catholic public figure, does not appear to know the absolute basics. The Pope said that the Council contains no new definitive dogmas. Okay, what about definitive doctrine? There is a difference between a definitive dogma and a definitive doctrine. And what about other non-definitive teachings you still need to assent to? Does Dr. Taylor Marshall know the profession of faith? With firm faith, I also believe everything contained in the Word of God, whether written or handed down in tradition, which the Church, either by a solemn judgment or by the ordinary and universal magisterium, sets forth to be believed as divinely revealed. I also firmly accept and hold each and everything definitively proposed by the Church regarding teaching on faith and morals. Dr. Taylor Marshall seems oblivious to the fact that the teachings of Vatican II can also be infallible through other organs like the ordinary and universal magisterium, such as when Vatican II teaches undefined dogmas like the resurrection of the dead. Dr. Taylor Marshall also seems to be unaware that there is a difference between dogma and doctrine. The second paragraph concerns definitive doctrine being taught by the Church. Does Taylor Marshall reject definitive doctrine? And in the third paragraph it says, "Moreover, I adhere with religious submission of will and intellect to the teachings which either the Roman Pontiff or the College of Bishops enunciate when they exercise their authentic magisterium, even if they do not intend to proclaim these teachings by a definitive act." The Church can teach non-definitively, but you still need to adhere to it with religious submission of your intellect and will. How Taylor Marshall tries to justify his dissent from Vatican II just because Pope Paul VI said that the Council does not contain extraordinary dogmatic pronouncements and that you can therefore interpret everything on your own and find mistakes in it, a well-informed person would conclude that you reject undefined dogmas being taught by the ordinary and universal magisterium, and this would be heresy. And people would also conclude that you reject and dissent from definitive and non-definitive Catholic doctrine being taught at Vatican II by the Church. Vatican II contains numerous teachings on doctrine, definitive and non-definitive. But Dr. Taylor Marshall's position, objectively speaking, if you take him at his word, says that you can reject it and find problems with it. Is that Catholic? No. That is a Protestant spirit. This is not traditional Catholicism. And by the way, remember that Dr. Taylor Marshall accused Nostra Aetate of heresy. I refer you to my previous video on that. I will put that in the description, where I refute that in a bit more detail. But just to recap, where Taylor Marshall accuses Nostra Aetate of heresy, in reality, it is not even a teaching, because the Council did not propose that part as being true, it being successful and salvific. But in Dr. Taylor Marshall's mind, Nostra Aetate is proposing a heresy as being true. And now that you know that this is actually an authoritative ecumenical council with teachings on faith and morals, it means that Dr. Taylor Marshall's unfaithful and distorted interpretations mean that the magisterium of the Church is authoritatively teaching and proposing that heresies are true, and that the Catholic faithful are bound to accept these authoritative teachings of the magisterium of the Church. Yes, non-definitive teachings by definition are fallible, they can be wrong, but it will not be wrong to the extent that it is a heresy. It would be a safe error. It is theologically safe for you to hold and trust the non-definitive teachings of the Church. Even if a teaching can theoretically be wrong, it is still safe for your soul to hold to it. But it is not safe to hold to heresy. It poses a danger to your soul. So to summarize this video, Taylor Marshall tried to justify his disobedience by saying that Vatican II was pastoral, but he completely misunderstands what it means for Vatican II to have a pastoral character. The same Pope he quoted says that the Council contained authoritative teachings, which mean that you cannot dismiss these texts being taught by the Church. Dr. Taylor Marshall also seems to be unaware that there is a difference between dogma and doctrine being taught by the Church, and he seems oblivious to the fact that other definitive and non-definitive authoritative teachings, as set out by the profession of faith, even exist, and this is utilized by the Second Vatican Council repeatedly. Him rejecting these teachings and even accusing it of heresy is a Protestant spirit. This is not traditional Catholic behavior. And lastly, his unfaithful and untraditional interpretations of Vatican II severely damages the faith a Catholic can have in a magisterium of the Church and damages the purpose of having a magisterium in the first place. So it is no wonder that non-Catholics use Taylor Marshall videos in order to make Catholics leave the Church. It is no wonder that many Catholics have admitted that they almost left Catholicism because of Taylor Marshall, before they were pulled back to the Church through other individuals taking a more balanced, traditional and godly approach. And sadly, it is no wonder that many ex-Catholics have admitted that Taylor Marshall's content actually made them leave the Church. This is why it is so important to raise awareness on these issues. Thank you for watching. God bless.